Today in page 118, Tractate Shabbat. It's a page that dealing with Kevod Shabbat. How appropriate it is to have this daf while we are about to read the Torah portion of Aseret HaDibrot, Parashat Yitro, the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, we have the 5 commandments on the right side and the 5 commandments on the left side. The Rabbi says the right side is the commandment between man and God, and the left side between man and his fellow. And how beautiful is the foundation of all faith by our religion, that summarize the whole Torah according to the Zohar is the abbreviation of the Torah, the 10 Commandments. Isn't that fascinating that 10 Commandments was delivered before the golden calf? But isn't also so interesting to see the 10 Commandments came at a time of great chaos, time of wilderness, world of chaos. Then we have this institution of godly 10 Commandments, which to this very day, so many years later, getting close to 4,000 years later, still is the foundation of so many faith, foundation of people's life. With that in mind, we zoom in today of the 4th commandment. Remember this Shabbat, the Sabbath, to sanctify it. 6 days you should labor, and the 7th day you should be holy. You should not involve in any type of work, neither you nor your animals or anything that belongs to you. With that in mind, we have this important commandment, the 4th one, remember the Shabbat. And the Rabbi tells us there is a concept that's called Kvod Shabbat, honoring the Shabbat. Honoring the Shabbat in the sense of preparation, honoring the Shabbat by enjoying a special meal several times in Shabbat, and honoring the Shabbat by making to ourselves and to our world a clear distinguishment between the secular week and the Shabbat. No longer we involved with neither email nor cell phone nor any type of communication if it's not urgent. This is a time of spirituality. So with that in mind, what we're going to zoom in today is a daf that dealing with a lot of midrashic interpretation and understanding of that phase, which is observe the Shabbat, remember the Shabbat, the 4th commandment. 117b, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Here is the question. Everyone in this room, I think, is on a strictly diet. Yet, when it's come to Shabbat, all of a sudden, we have this obligation to eat. Not just that, part of the joy of Shabbat, we have to eat more than once. So here is the source of the idea of eating on Shabbat, actually the obligation. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages tells us, Kama sudot chayav adam lechol b'Shabbat. How many meals a person is obligated to eat on Shabbat? There are a very clear explanation among the rabbis that since the manna came from heaven, it have double portion on Friday. So therefore, on Shabbat, each meal contain 2 chalot, double portion lechem Mishna. That apply to Friday night, Saturday noontime when we come back from services, and then in the afternoon, the 3rd meal. For sure, those who really fill their stomach with too much food during lunch, especially in our shul that have such a lavish kiddushim, sponsored by good-hearted people that thinking about everyone, including the people that come just for the rabbi's sermon and for the kiddush. But then when they walk out and your stomach is full of food, then it's hard to go ahead and eat the 3rd meal. But yes, it's an obligation to eat the 3rd meal, but that's lechatchila. A person should have a double portion. If there are situations that you cannot eat the double breads, the rabbis said that b'diavad, in that circumstance you can go ahead and eat either some type of cake or cookies or even vegetables. So they said, where is the source for that? So we have first 2 opinions. Typical Jewish, we have 2 Jews and 5 opinions. We have here 2 different opinions. Right? The first one said that there are 3 meals, 1 at night and 2 during the day. Rabbi Chidka said there are 4 meals And here you see the sources. Rabbi Yochanan u'shnei mikra echad arshu, both of them bring a source from one pasuk. The pasuk is in the book of Shmot, book of Exodus, chapter 16, sentence 25. They said, "Vayom Moshe ichlu hayom, ki Shabbat hayom laHashem hayom timtzeu basadeh." If you hear somehow the abbreviation of that sentence in Hebrew, the word hayom, meaning today, repeats in one line in the Torah 3 times. Moses said, "You shall eat hayom, today, because today is Shabbat." Today you cannot find it in the field, via negativa, which is all the strong instruction of Moses in regards to manna. So since the Torah repeats in one pasuk, in one line, 3 times the word, what word? Hayom, 3 times. I know it's early in the morning, I know, it's fine. Since it's written 3 times the word Hayom, so Rabbi Chidka Savar, Hanet Lata Hayom, Rabbi Chidka hold that since you repeat the word Hayom 3 times, it's applied to 3 meals, Levar Me'orta. That's excluding the meal of the evening before that, which is even, we said Vayhi Vayhi Boker, the even the day. Rabbi Chidka said that applied the 3 lines, 3 times repetition of the word Hayom applied to 3 meals on Shabbat. So if you put all together, you have how many?
3.
4.
4.
1 at night.
Right.
And the 3 that the Torah said the word Hayom apply the day. That's Rav Chidka. V'Rabbanan Savrei Bahadei Orta. The Rabbanan, the sages hold that since the Torah repeats the word Hayom, how many times?
3 times.
3 times. That apply 1 at night and 2 during the Shabbat day. Tnan, naflad leika b'leil Shabbat. Now we try to bring a proof that strengthens the opinion of the sages, unlike or against Rabbi Chidka's opinion. Tanan, we learn in the Mishnah, naflad leika b'leil Shabbat. If in the Friday evening fire took place, 18 at the top of the page, matzilin mazon shalosh udot. One rescue a food for 3 meals. So the Gemara asks, "My love, the lo achal." So it means that someone he didn't eat yet the Friday night meal. So therefore, you should save for him from a fire the minimum amount needed for Shabbat, which is 3 meals. So what do you prove from that? Unlike Rab Chidka, it means that the whole Shabbat together, how many meals? 3. Why? Because that's what the Mishnah instructed us in a case of fire. So the Gemara rejected that and said, no, the achal, You know what happened? The fire took place after the meal, or during the meal. And now we need to rescue for what? For tomorrow morning, for Shabbat morning, which is the another 3. Another proof. Shacharit, if, God forbid, the fire took place in the morning, so how many meals you need to eat?
3.
Matzilin mazon shtei sudot. You need to save meal for 2 meals. So the Gemara said, "My love, the lo achal." Maybe it applies to situation you didn't eat the morning meal, so therefore you need to eat 2 meals. So it means altogether only 3. Says lo the achal, which means the fire took place after lunch. So again, the last 2 seudot, 2 meals that left, that's what they need to rescue, and therefore again it matched the opinion of Rabbi Chidka. Another source, Bemincha. What happened in the afternoon? A fire took place. Matzil mazon seuda achat. You need to save a meal, a meal or 1 meal. My love, the lo achal. Maybe you say that the story is he didn't eat. Lo, the achal. He ate already what? Seuda shlishi, the 3rd meal. So again, this is the strong dialogue over who is right, Rabbi Chidka or Rabbanan. How about the last clause of the Mishnah that said that regardless when the fire took place, if it's a Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, we should rescue how many? 3 meals. Which means that the first Tana, the first opinion, hold that there are only 3 and not 4, unlike Rabbi Chidka's opinion. So the only question is, what happened if you already ate some? Ela machvarta matnitin delo ki Rabbi Chidka. To wrap it up, everything together, the obligation to eat on Shabbat, how many meals? Are 3 meals, unlike Rabbi Chidka. So Tosfot here said that the whole idea of mincha, meaning has to be in the late afternoon. That's the time of the 3rd meal. And some say that by using the word mincha, it's not necessarily has to be that time. There are opinions like Baal Lachot Gdolot and others say that you can split the lunch to 2, and in that sense you have like a 3rd meal there. If you go to our kiddushim, you can do it easily, which, for lack of better term, it's a kal basavua kiddushim. I can't eat so much, you know. If I eat what they're giving in the kiddushim, it's like my father. My father was a rabbi of community for 43 years. So we used to go to kiddushim on Shabbat. Sometimes they have in different location in his neighborhood. He was a rabbi of the whole neighborhood. So they have sometimes 3 simchas in one Shabbat. You have here bar mitzvah, and over there it's a ofruf, and another place is another simcha. So my father never ate. He always tasted a little bit, but never sit and eat a meal. And he always have the excuse that my mom will be hurt if we start eating, you know, in those kiddushim, especially lavish kiddushim. Now, since we talk about the honor of Shabbat and we speak about the meal, now we dig in with the whole subject of tzedakah, which is, since we speak about the importance of eating on Shabbat, but let's face it, not everyone afford to have a nice meal on Shabbat, 3 meals on Shabbat. So we first dig in the whole concept of obligation of community to sponsor those people who cannot afford meal, and then we expand it also to Shabbat. The Hadetnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Tractate Pe'ah, chapter 8, Mishnah 7. מי שיש לו מזון 2 סעודות לא ייטול מן התמחוי. There are 2 types of indigent, 2 types of poor people that impose upon the community, which means the community has the obligation to take care of them. 1, people who need money. Can be for their businesses, can be for their survival. They need money, they need cash. Another level, people who depend on tamchui, such as disabled. Tamchui, it's like basic, for best term, it's a place that you feed people, like homeless drive. People who cannot, either disabled, have all kind of drugs, drunks, you name it. And it's the obligation of the community to feed those people. So there are people who call gabaim, people who are ushers, who are in charge for taking care of that. And the big question come up, how exactly, what term, what condition, what restriction you put when you filled up this non-profit organization. Again, we're talking here about 2 entities. So sometimes the situation is that the tamchui, the place that sponsor those people, were overwhelmed with requests from people. Unfortunately, the way that world runs, we wish that never happened, but the way it is, there are people who really desperately depend on the tamchui, on the place that they feed them. So now the rabbis come in and put the categories, who really, number 1, entitled to take charity, who is entitled to take food from the food drives, and what type of restriction we put in this, not because we don't wish to feed everyone all the time, but when it's too imposing and there are limitations that the gabaim, the people who are in charge, can take, they have to put some type of boundaries. So they said, whoever mi sheyesh lo 2 seudot, the minimum meals that the persons need are 2 a day. So they said, whoever had the ability to support himself by eating independently 2 meals a day, he is forbidden to go ahead and collect food from the tamchui. So in those days it was the ushers that carry a large baskets, and people put in all kind of food and things like that, and they put it in a central place, and it was a time, they announced the time of those meals. So anybody who has 2 meals a day, he cannot collect from there. That, by the way, what I'm telling you, it's according to Rashi, the very basic explanation. Mazon 14 lo yitol min hakupa. 14 meaning 14. We have how many days a week? 7. Each day, how many meals we said we have to give? 2 meals. Altogether, 14. So the GEMARA said, whoever has a food for 14 meals a day, he should not collect anything from the charity fund. Which means, in every Friday afternoon, they used to distribute the cash of the charity fund to those people who embarrassed to take from the tamchui, but people who needs that for their meals. So if someone is embarrassed, let's say Mr. Reuven is embarrassed to go and be among those homeless that collecting food a daily basis, but he needs to support his family and himself. So they established this confidential charity fund, and people come in and said, I'm desperate, so they give them in advance cash, that amount of cash support for, let's say, if a meal, if you go to a, let's say David Chu in Baltimore, right? So he charged for lunch, let's say $10. So you figure out 2 meals a day is $20 a day, times 14 is $280, just to understand. So those people who embarrassed to take from the tamchui, they used to come on Friday afternoon, and they collect, in our language, $280, that's supposed to be enough for them to feed themselves for how long? For 7 days, 2 meals a day. So they said anybody who has the ability to support...
They don't account for the extra meal on Shabbat then, so they wouldn't make it like 15.
Soon we talk about the extra meal, it's a good point.
Okay.
So he said that person needs to wait for the next cycle in order to collect. He shouldn't collect money if he has that. So they said, money, who hold that? Lo Rabbanan velo Rabbi Chidka. That's exactly what they will ask. Who follow that? Neither the sages nor Rabbi Chidka. Why? I Rabbanan chamsrei avayan. If according to the sages he needs to collect how many? 15. Rabbi Chidka shitztre avian. If you go by Rabbi Chidka, you need to collect 16, and so far what we said, only 14. So the Olam Rabbanan basically go by the sages. The Amrinan lay that we said to him, Mai de bait lemechal ba'puke shabta achle b'shabta. Whatever you intend to eat on Saturday night, because again, he has the 7 times 2, so one of the days is Shabbat. So we gave him a money for 2 meals on Shabbat. So this fellow planning to eat that meal for Melave Malka. You know what is Melave Malka? Is the meat, it's a meal that we eat after doing Avdalah, like escorting the bride, the Shabbat. So they said to him, oh, if you are such an indigent, guess what? Achle b'shabta. You take the second meal and eat it as the 3rd meal on Shabbat. So it means that it's 7 times 2, and that's the way it is. Now Rashi said that it's a great mitzvah to do Melave Malka, but Rashi said that applies solely for people who can afford it. If someone cannot afford it, then when he gets to 7 times 2 is 14, the number for the day of Shabbat, the second one, has to be for Shaleshudas, for the 3rd meal. So the GEMARA asks a question, Leima Rabbanani velo Rabbi Chidka. So what happened? Now what are you saying? You're saying that you ask the person to take that meal on Shabbat, or the second meal, and use it as the meal of Shabbat, the second meal for that day. Is that turned to whom? According to Rabbanan, according to the sages. Which means only the 3rd meal but missing the fourth meal that Rabbi Chidka said. Afilu tema Rabbi Chidka, even you go by Rabbi Chidka, there is a resolution. The Amrinala, we asked to a person who collect money from that charity fund, we said to him, Man de bait lemechal be'ar leshabta achla leorta. Whatever you plan to eat in the morning, wait and eat in the evening, which means usually they take one of the meals on Friday and make it Friday night meal. So now what happened? He has a meal on Friday night, he has a meal on Saturday morning, and he has a meal for the third meal. So they said, so, you mean to say that you ask him to fast on Friday in order to eat on Shabbat? That's not the way we are. Now, by the way, when it's come to Motzei Shabbat, in the next page we're going to see a proof that Melaveh Malka is crucial, it's a very important meal. If a person afforded this, they said, again it's a midrashic, but it's beautiful, they said, at the end of the day, which we believe, like Ezekiel 37, they said at the time of resurrection, so the bodies decay after passing, but it's only the Zohar said that out of the human body, even its decay, there is only one sinew, one bone that will not decay, and from that bone they have the chance for resurrection, which we believe. So they said the feeling of that bone and the belief of that, it's from the Melaveh Malka, for the merit of escorting the Shabbat. Mani, so who is this Mishna in Tractate Shabbat hold? According to whom? Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Akiva said something very painful and very deep. He said, Aseh Shabbatcha Chol ve'al titzterech labriot. What did Rabbi Akiva said? Who understand what Rabbi?
Like a weekday. Treat your Shabbat
Rabbi
like
Akiva
a weekday.
said, make your Shabbat like a weekday and do not be beholden to other beings. Right? It's preferable to eat 2 meals on Shabbat as he does during the week if he can thereby avoid taking charity, which is a very strong sentence. So, but Rabbi Akiva hold that that's applied to a poor person who can support himself without taking any type of charity. Now, the Tosfot here, deal with that, and he said that how we should reconcile. First, the first question we should ask is the famous sentence the Midrash said, Levu alai vani porea. When it's come to Shabbat, they said in the book of Malachi too, they said that you should go ahead and use your credit card in our language in order to buy Shabbat meals, and God said, I will help you out to pay that. So here, what's it all about? Speak about someone who can afford. So someone who can afford, that's different, but someone not, then it's a different story. Now, I would like to share with you a halacha in Mishnah Brura, Reish Membet, 242. V'hadet nan end bnei en pochatin le'ani over makom le'makom. The Mishnah Brura said in 242, there are 3 different categories of level of observant, in a sense, of meals. One category, someone who can afford, someone who has the money and he can have the 3 meals. Second one, someone who has some, but he is still not enough for 3 meals. The third category, someone who's really poor and he needs to have, which soon you learn, kasa de harsana, like some type of very basic fish. So they said, v'hadet nan, what we learn at the beginning clause of the Mishnah, and pochatim le'aniya overim makom makom. If you have a poor person, he's a peddler. He goes from one place to another, almost like fiddler on a roof. Right? A person will go from one location to another. Unfortunately, in our history, many of our ancestors were peddlers. They poor, they go, they're persecuted, and they go from one location to another and collect fun. or sell things, etc. So the minimum you should give him, מכיכר בפודיון מארבע שאים בסלע. You give him in a value of a bread that it's enough for him to buy in a coin of those years it's sela, that it means that it's sufficient for 2 meals. So they said, lan notnim lo parnasat lina. If he is sleeping over, so you give him, you cover that expense. Soon you see what is involved. Ve'im Shabbat notnim lo mazon shalosh sudot. However, if this fellow, poor fellow, staying over weekend, over Shabbat, you give him a food for how many? For 3 meals. Leima Rabbanani v'lo Rabbi Chidka. Now you see another proof that we go by the sages, not by Rabbi Chidka, that how many meals? 3 meals. Because you see here, the poor person, you give him 3 meals. So said, no, L'olam Rabbi Chidka. We go for the 4 meals. It means that he already ate 1 meal, so you give him another 3. So we give him another 3, so you all together you have 4. So they ask, so now you let him leave with empty-handed, which means that you force him to eat on Shabbat the other meal. So he like leave with no food, and you know the famous biblical text of a red heifer. One of the obligations the elder of the city has is someone who left with no food. That's part of our obligation to make sure that our guests have a food for the journey upon leaving our homes. So they said, so we give him another meal in addition, the Ramban said, which is for Sunday morning. But meanwhile, he eats that meal that he have now. So they said, "My parnasat lina." What does that mean, parnasat lina? What you give him an extra for the sleeping time? So they said, "Amar Papa Puria uvei sadia." It means you give him a bed and a cushions. תנו רבנן, קערות שאכל בהם ערבית, מדיחן לאכול בשחרית. That's a question that Larry asked. How about cleaning the dishes after the meal? So they said here, if you have a bowls from which one ate in the evening of Shabbat, he may rinse them in order to eat from them in the morning. Why? Because bowl from which one ate in the morning, in the evening, so he needs it for the following meal. The same, שחרית מדיחן לאכול בצהריים, בצהריים מדיחן לאכול במנחה, מנחה ואילך שוב אינו מדיח. So again, if he use it for the morning, he rinses them for the afternoon. Bowls from which one ate in the afternoon, we rinse them and eat them in the afternoon. However, from the afternoon and onward, one may no longer rinse them because there are no further need for these bowls on Shabbat.
So the question is, if you have enough bowls that you don't need to wash bowls, so say you have extras, should you not wash them?
You just said it, yes.
Yeah. You should not then. You should
That's
even,
exactly what
even
we
during
said.
the day.
Yeah.
It's called tircha. The Ravid said that in Hilchot Shabbat 23, he explained in the Rambam that that's you know, the only idea that allowed to rinse them is when you don't have others.
Yeah.
It's a book called Tosefet Shabbat. He explained it that it's called tircha, that it's imposing on yourself. On Shabbat you're supposed to rest. So that's the idea. אבל כוסות וקיתוניות וסלחות מדיח והולך כל היום כולו לפי שאין קבע לשתייה. However, if you need certain utensils such as cup, you drink a tea, drink a little cake, that's all day long. So because it's no fixed time for drinking, and one does not know when he will drink again, so therefore you can go ahead and rinse it and prepare it at any times. I don't know if you have the privilege like me to go on cruise sometimes. When I went on a cruise last time, I never saw something like that. You go to a place and they announce every hour, oh, in that so-and-so floor there is now a special cake and a special fruits and a special meal. And I could not figure out how in the world people can eat so much. In one hand, Baruch Hashem, there is abundance. Sometimes, in a way, I'm wondering if it's not like overboarding and doing something that is very wrong. We go ahead and eat and eat and eat and eat, and that's what most of the time they just go and taste different food in different location all day long. I can say that, speaking about the past, years back, I'm talking at those of you who remember at the 70s, even at the 60s. So I was a little child, and when it was a simcha, it was bar mitzvah, it was a wedding. So you have a cake, you have whatever they serve, and they have for immediate family, very small group, they sit for a regular meal. Nowadays, in some places they doing better, but you go to some of the lavish weddings or some of the lavish bar mitzvahs, and you're wondering if that's really what Judaism is all about. Because I really like when people make a modest simcha and use that money to prepare them for the children's education, to take the children to Israel, to sponsor people who cannot afford, etc. That's really a teaching of Jewish simcha. It's not that lavish simcha is bad, but it's not really, I feel, it's not fully in the spirit of what Judaism stands for. But again, we leave it like that. That's not what we study now. אמר רבי שמעון בן פזי, אמר רבי שמעון בן לוי משום בר כפרה. כל המקיים 3 סעודות בשבת ניצול מ3 פורענויות. Here is a promise. Why it's a promise? Because it's like measure for measure. Someone who observe the 3 meals on Shabbat, so he will be saved from 3 future tragedies. That if you read in the Bible, there is a story about the 3 punishments of the world, which we don't know for sure, but it's basically talk about messianic days, the end of the days, the suffering that preceded the advent of the Messiah. So they said if someone eat the 3 meals on Shabbat with a sense of sacredness and properly, he will be saved. From what? Number 1, מחבלו של Mashiach, from the sorrow that preceded the time of Messiah. If you want to read more, you read in the Tractate Talmud, page 112. It's an elaboration on that. Second, ומדינה של גיהינום, from the judgment of Gehinom, which is in the better of term, it's like hell. ומלחמת גוג ומגוג. As you know, in the Bible, they said that before the end of the days, in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, they said it will be a war between 2 mighty nations. So someone who involved with the 3 meals will be saved. So the Bach explained in the Shulchan Aruch, Reish Tzadik Aleph 291, that it's a measure for measure. Why? Because if you look at the evening prayer, we said the word Ata Kidashta, you are sanctified. You are sanctified applied to Bereshit, to the whole sanctification of the creation. Then on Shabbat morning, we said during the prayer, Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko, that Moses and the Jewish people were happy for the blueprint of life, which is the Torah. So, and the third meal, and the third one is, we said in the doing mincha, Ata echad v'shimcha echad. You are one, and your name will be on. Which again, so the Bach said that each of them, it's a application to different stages. The first one, which said Ata kidashta, you sanctified, express the time of the Bereshit, the beginning of the Messianic era, the creation of the Messianic era. Then the second one, Yismach Moshe, the greatness of the Torah, the fire of the Torah, applied to the fire of the Gehinom. And the third, Ata Echad, you are one, the Bach said that's applied to the war between Gog and Magog, that the person will be safe from that. How? The GEMARA explained, בחבלו של משיח כתיבך יום. וכתיבה אתה מיני אנוכי שולח לכם את אליהו נביא לפני בו יום. So we now juxtapose the two word yom, meaning day, twice, which is that a person will be saved from that sorrow. מדינה של גיהנום, from judgment of גיהנום, כתיב אך יום. וכתיבתם, they said in the book of צפניה, chapter 1, יום עברה היום ההוא. So that day will be a Evra, which is the day the Rashash explained that it's not Geinom, but it's only the punishment for the wickedness in this world. And then they said, "Mimilchem Gog uMagog," a person will be saved from the war of Gog uMagog, because it's written, Ktivach hayom uktivatam biyom bo Gog. Here it's written war, and it's written with regard to war of Gog and Magog, and it shall be on that day, in Ezekiel 38, that Gog arrives in the land of Israel. So that's part of that prophecy. So Maharsha explained that that's related. If a person make the effort, so it's like a reward for good deeds, for partake of 3 meals. אמר רבי יוחנן משום רבי יוסי, כל המענג את השבת נותנים לו נחלה בלי מצרים. Anyone who delights in the Shabbat, make the Shabbat a joy time, so they give him a boundless portion. So Rashi said here, klomar, ein laketz, without the end. So I explain in my book, Birua Klomar Berashi al Shas, I explain here at length the meaning of Rashi using the word Klomar. In general, it applied to a very large reward, which means it's not necessarily a reward in cash, that like people come to the synagogue with a laundry list and said, I did so and so, I want in exchange so and so. But it's applied more to the either afterlife or the spiritual world, depending how you take the text. So the source, Isaiah 58, שנאמר אז תתענג על השם והרכבתיך על במות הארץ ואכלתיך נחלת יעקב אביך כפי השם דיבר. Said in a sentence, and then you shall delight in the Lord, and you shall cause you to ride the heights of the Lord, and to feast on the inheritance of Jacob your father, as the mouth of God has spoken. 118b, לא כאברהם שכתוב בו כה מתהלך בארץ לא הוכר לרוחבה, ולא כיצחק שכתוב בו כי לך יבל לזכר יתן את כל הארצות האלה, אלא יעקב שכתוב בו פרס הימה וקרב לסופון אבנים. So unlike we go by the ancestors, unlike Abraham that said that you should go and travel the land, not Isaac that said I give you all the inheritance, and not Jacob he said that you should expand in the north, south, and without any limitations. Sfat might here ask why it's a difference between the ancestors, but we're running out of time. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak אמר נתון משובut galuyot. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said that he will save from all this oppression of the exile. That's the reward for honoring the Shabbat. Why? דכתיבה אחא והרכבתיך על במותי הארץ וכתיבתם ואתה על במותי תדרוך. They use the word bamot twice, and the second one is in Isaiah, and here it's in the Bereshit in Genesis 13. In both of them use the same word. So they said that apply to what? That apply that I'm sorry, the first one is Isaiah 58 and the second one Devarim, Deuteronomy 33. So because they use the word bamot in both of them, so they want to say that one who delight the Shabbat will be saved from enemies. The same way as he accepts the yoke of Shabbat, Hashem remove the yoke of others from him. אמר רבי יהודה אמר כל המענג את השבת נותנים לו למשול ליבו. Anyone who delight the Shabbat, they give him what he wish. שנאמר ותנהג על השם ותיתן לך משול ליבך. They said in the Psalm 37, you shall delight in God and give you what you wish. או לגזן יודע מהו. what type of delightness. שהוא אומר בקראת השבת נוגה ואומר בזה אורלי. Which means that he really received the spirituality of Shabbat, the essence of Shabbat. במה מנגו, how a person have the delightness of Shabbat. So there are several opinions. רב יהודה ברד, רב שילת בר משמד רב אמר בשלשיות של טרדים. He said that that's applied to a dish of beets. So they said, the Bach said that it's good for the heart, good for the eye, and good for the intestine. ודגים גדולים בראשי שומרים, larfish and head of garlic. רבי חייא ברש"י אמר אפילו דבר מועט. Even רבי חייא ברש"י said even a small item that one prepare in defense to Shabbat. שבת השאור הרי זה עונג, ולכבוד שבת השאור הרי זה עונג. מה היא אמר פאפה קסא דארסנה? And he made it in the lightness of Shabbat. So Papa said that's applied to a small fried fish. So the Tur said in Reishman Bet in 248, and the Bach said that number one, it's like expense, income and expense. Some people have always the thought that Shabbat expense, you know, involve a lot of sometimes a lot of money, but the truth is, they said that Hashem will bring it back to a person. The Rambam said in Hilchot Shabbat chapter 30, he said that the four things that mentioned in Shabbat, two from the Torah and two from the sages. So the Torah, they said in Ten Commandments, as we're going to read this Shabbat, remember the Shabbat. They said in the book of Deuteronomy, safeguard the Shabbat. And then you have the whole idea of honoring the Shabbat, which is more rabbinic. So they said, Bameh me'ango, so that's different way a person have the joy of Shabbat. אמר בחייא ברב אמר רבי יוחנן כל המשמר שבת כיחדו אפילו עובד עבודה זרה כדורש לא מוכנים לו. If someone observes Shabbat properly, even that he worship idol, like the time of Enosh, which is a terrible idol worshipper, they forgive him. שנאמר, it said in Isaiah 56, אשרי אנוש שיעשה זאת, ובן אדם שומר שבת מחללו ושומר אדום מעשות כל רע. אל תקרא מחללו, אלא מחולו. So that's playing with the Hebrew word. That means that it's forgive to him. With regard to the generation of Enosh, it's written that it's like they forgive the sin of a person if you observe in the Shabbat. Amar Rav Yuda, Amar Rav Ilmalei, and that's with Yud. There's Ilmalei in Aleph and Malei in Yud. So one is positive, one is negative. Here they said Ilmalei with Yud, meaning if Shamru Yisrael Shabbat Ushna Lo Shaltam Em Umav Velashon. If the nation of Israel observed Shabbat, the first one, they are in the desert, so no other nation can control it. Control them. They said that even Moses told them not to go. At the 7th day, some people went out and tried to collect. And right after that, the end of the parsha said that Amalek came and tried to attack us. The Jewish people observe 2 Shabbatot, they right away will be saved. So they said, שנאמר, because it's written in Isaiah 56, כה אמר השם לסרסים אשר ישמעו בתי בכתיב עד רבע ובאים אל הר קודשי. So say God today, that He will open my Shabbatot, and it's written, I'll bring them to my holy mountain, and I will let them rejoice in my house of prayer. אמר רבי יוסי חלקי מאוכלי 3 סעודות בשבת. May my portion be among those who eat 3 meals on Shabbat. So the Sfat Emet explain, he says, what does that mean? My portion will be with the people. So he said, Rabbi Akiva told us that you make your Shabbat weekly and you should not depend on others. So he explained that it's applied to a mitzvah that for the public, which means if there are 3 meals that me'ochlei, it's written in plural, which means if you participate with the third meal, for example, many synagogues has a community. So we have 1 or several sponsors, and you partake of that. So regardless to your financial situation, you are partake of public meal. So this is called zchut hatzibur. The merit of the tzibur, of the public, carries a tremendous weight more than the individual. We always discuss, individual prayer versus prayer as part of the quorum that carries a different weight. אמר רבי יוסי, יהיה חלקי מגומרי הלל בכל יום. My portion should be those who complete Hallel every day. Say the opposite, that one who's overwhelmed and say every day Hallel, it's like a tantamount for one who curses and blasphemes God. Because again, we in our faith, we always say that God is unlimited. The minute you are limited God to a small measure, to a small description, you are basically circumscribing God instead of being omnipresent. So they said, when I wish to do it every day is when we do the preliminary service in the morning, which have all these psalms from 148 to 150. That's what I meant to say when I said Hallel, daily Hallel. Marsha explains that when you are praising God for the miracles of daily miracles, of daily survival, by saying those psalms every morning, that's part of saying a daily Hallel. Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi said, may my portion be among those who pray the morning and afternoon prayer with the rending of the sun, which means the morning prayer, the sunrise and afternoon prayer, to nightfall. Amar Rabbi Chia Barabba אמר רבי יוחנן, מצווה להתפלל עם דמדומי חמר. אמר בזרע מהיקרא יראוך שמש לפני ריח דורדורים. They said in Psalm 72 that they will fear you with the sun and before the moon, generation upon generation. So all of that, it's a expression to be partake of thanking God in both exchange of time. אמר רבי יוסי חלקים מתי בכל ימי העין. דאמר אמר רובן של הצדיקים מתים בכל ימי העין. He said, I wish if whenever I die it will be for intestinal disease, which means that they say that righteous people die from that, which is a tremendous harsh disease, that the feeling it's the sins of the righteous people are cleansed before the death, so also as a result they die with a clean body. It reminds me, my late father-in-law was the chief rabbi of Shomron, so he was very athletic and very strong person. And suddenly, when he just about to reach his age of 50, boom, he has a cancer in his brain and he died in a couple of months. Left 10 kids. So when you see him on a wheelchair, suddenly it's like going smaller and smaller and smaller, like a little candle that's extinguishing. You understand this GEMARA that say that that the righteous people are cleansed before the death, so they die with a clean body. Anyway, Ramar Rabbi Yossi Echelki Mimetei B'derech Mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi said, my portion among those who die in a path on the mitzvah, which means the death was while they doing a fulfilling commandment. Rabbi Yossi Echelki Machnise Shabbat B'Tiber Mutzei Shabbat B'Tzipori, that Tibera it's in a valley and Tzipor is the top of the mountain, which means that what we said in one of the Shabbat song, Acharim Latzet Min HaShabbat U'Marim Lavo, which means that we accepting the Shabbat earlier and we let the Shabbat over late, which again is expression of faith, not to rush to open our computer or to do business or do other things, but expanding the Shabbat longer as part of believing and honoring the Shabbat. He said, I wish to be among those who sit out in the study wall, which means cause others to come and sit and study, another one who announce the time to leave the study hall and go to eat. That's a very important prayer that people should have all the time, that I should be among those who distribute charity, who collect charity, but not the distribute charity. One who collects charity collect fixed amount. Distributing may inadvertently fail to give the poor person enough to cover his needs, because it's always, Rashi said, it's a question if you do it right. Rabbi Yossi said, may my portion be among those who suspect of sin and there are no basic of that suspicion. Unfortunately that happened, that sometimes people are suspected of things that, so the Ritva explained, it's atonement for someone's sins. If he suffered from defamation of character or slander against him, etc., people said things about a certain sin that he did not commit. Rapapa said, yes, it happened to me, that they suspected me something and I wasn't. So the GEMARA said, it's a famous GEMARA, that they said in Bava Batra 10, they said that somebody owed him money, or they said other option that that he was walking and he almost died from stoning, and they said that the poor person came to him and didn't help him. Anyway, so but it's also a GEMARA in Moed Katan, page 18, that said that that he gave a loan to a lady, non-Jewish lady, and she blamed him for things that he wasn't guilty. It's a story with her son, etc. But he will suffer from that. In other words, that they're blaming for things that he wasn't guilty. Rabbi Yossi said, I engaged in a relation 5 times, and I have 5 great giants. Name of 5 great chases that came from him. There's another one that named Vardimas. Vardimas is like its name, but it's also expression. So they say, Vardimas elu Menachem. Vardimas shemanav doing leveret. We call him Vardimas because his face is beautiful like a rose, so it became that name. Remember that Rabbi Yossi mitzvot nalo kiyem. So he told me that only 5 times, you never have the regular obligation of honah the Torah asked for a regular relation. So they said, so there's a famous saying that GEMARA said in Eruvin, page 100b, that one wants to have a male children, has to have Yiv'al v'Yishne. So in that sense, he did relations again. אמר רבי יוסי, מה לא קראתי לאשתי, אשתי ושורי שורי לה, אשתי ביתי ושורי סדי. So again, here is expression of modesty. So he said, I never call my wife, and my ox, and I always call it like a different name, like a third party, like field, because the force of the field, in other words, I want to express modesty. אמר רבי יוסי, ממה לא הסתכלתי במילה שלי? I never look at my circumcision, again, expression of modesty. אמר רבי, מה איתה מה קראו לך רבנו הקדוש? Why they call him the holy rabbi, the one who put together the Mishna? אמר לו, ממה לא הסתכלתי במילה שלי? Never look at my circumcision. ברבי מילתא אכילה ובייש, והכניס ידו תחת אבנתו. They said behind his avnet, his belt, his girdle, he didn't put his, insert his hand below that belt. Due to great modesty. ואמר רבי יוסי, מה לא גרו בכל ביתים ברי חלוקי? He went to another level of modesty. In my days, the walls of my house never saw the seams of my robe, which means that, again, it's an expression of modesty. אמר רבי יוסי, מעל לא עברתי על דברי חבריי. He said, I never violated the words of my friends. יודע, אני אשאל עצמי, שאיני כהן, אומרים לי, חבריי ליד הדוכן, אני עולה. I know that I'm not a Kohen, I'm not a priest, but if they ask me to do platform, I go. So the rabbi asked, what does that mean, I go, if you're not supposed to? And the rabbis explained, the Tosfot said, and Ramah said that it's not that he went to the Duchan instead of Kohanim, and he talked in a language of Guzma, an exaggeration, but it means that he did what they asked him to do. ואמר רבי יוסי, אמרתי דבר וחזרתי לאחוריי. Says, I never said something and then retreated from. So Rabbi Yossi never says something positive or negative about a specific person and then deny it. So the Chafetz Chaim Hilchot Lashon Hara said that that's not the halacha. Halacha that a person should not say any type of Lashon Hara. Omar Rav Nachman, Shabbat. He says, may I receive my reward because I fulfilled the obligation of 3 meals on Shabbat. I did something different, which is I learned the meaning of the tefillah, of the prayer. I will never walk 4 cubits, my head uncovered. I fulfilled the mitzvah of tefillin magnificently. Nachman said that mine, it's that I did the mitzvah of tzitzit magnificently. אמר לרבי יוסף ברי דרבא, אבוך במה זהיר תפי, your father is more scrupulous. אמר לי בציצית, יום אחד אהב סליק בדרגה, if סליק חוטה ולא נחית ליד כמה דולר מה. It's an example. One day he was climbing the stairs and a string from the ritual strings from the tzitzit was severed, and he would not descend until he placed a new string on the garment. אמר רבי, תתי לי חזיר עצוב ורמנן שלי מסכתי. So you see, because I saw a young Torah was complete the tractate that he studied. I made a special feast for the sages. How many meals a person is obligated to eat on Shabbat? Shulchan Aruch 291. One is obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbat. One should make certain to eat the third meal, even doing so require extra effort. Who is the person who fit to receive charity? A poor person who has enough food for 2 meals may not take from the charity plate from which food is distributed to the needy. In addition, one was a food for at least a week, which is 14 meals, not to take money from the charity fund. Aseh Shabbatcha Chol, that's statement of Rabbi Akiva, make your Shabbat like a weekday. A person is especially needy and has no collateral to enable him to take a loan to cover Shabbat expenses, should make his Shabbat like a weekday and not beholden to other being. According to Rabbi Akiva, it is preferable for a person to refrain from honoring Shabbat with food and drink than to receive charity. Nevertheless, one who is available means must take every effort he can to honor Shabbat. Now we said at Ani Over Makom LeMakom. How about a poor person who traveling from place to place? One is obligated to provide the poor person who is traveling with a loaf of bread that cost at least in padyun, that's the coin in those days, when the cost of grain is 4 seah, which means if the poor person stay overnight locally, one must provide him with bedding and a cushion. If he's known in the community, is provided with a support commensurate with his standard of living prior to being impoverished, which is hard. The GEMARA said about Hillel that even he do that to a rich person, he ride his horse. Hadachat kelim b'Shabbat, rinsing dishes on Shabbat. So the Shulchan Aruch 323 said it is only permitted to wash other dishes on Shabbat for use on Shabbat. Therefore, dishes that use for the third and the final meal on Shabbat may not be washed on Shabbat. Vessels used for drinking may be washed all day long because there are no fixed time for drinking, but other than that, only for the following meal if it's Friday night for Shabbat, if Shabbos morning for the following night. Then we have the obligation of Oneg Shabbat. It is appropriate that one delight and honor the Shabbat. One should cook special food in deference on Shabbat, even if other people do not consider that dish to be important. We said, one should make a certain to recite every verse of praise each morning. That's what we said every morning in Hallel. According to Rabbi Yochanan, one should rise early in the morning to recite the morning prayer and sunrise. And the afternoon prayer should be recited when the sun is setting, which means that extending the Shabbat, the second Shabbat a little more in both, in accepting and after Shabbat. And the last is, they say several halachot in regard to modesty. They said Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was a member of the early generation, was a pious sage, and he said, I never look at my circumcision, I didn't see the wall of my house, and I didn't walk 4 cubits with my head uncovered.